¿Cómo va? Excellent. So we're going to talk about design operations or design ops for the next bit of time. And, you know, we have some things that we may have experienced, such as, you know, how many people have really just been asked to make a wireframe pretty? Make it pretty. Slap it with a pretty stick, right? One of the American phrases is put lipstick on a pig, right? Katya taught me a new phrase, which is roll turd in glitter. It was a new one for me that she brought up. And this might be something that you experience in your design every day or every once in a while. Another one could be the sprint zero. How many of you do like a sprint before everyone else sprints? Yeah? Sounds familiar? Right. Exactly. This next one I need to give a trigger warning for, right? Just want to make sure everyone's prepared. But this scares the daylights out of me. It's beyond scary. Make it go away. And then there's these questions. Where is empathy? Where is synthesis? Where is reflection? Where is exploration? And finally, where is vision? So many of us are working in situations where these are difficult to bring to our design practices. Not impossible, but difficult, right? So we have problems in our design practice. And agile and engineering cultures sort of make us feel like square pegs trying to fit into a round hole very often. And we know what good design is. We know how to measure it as well. We can measure good design. We can measure it by usability. We can measure it on NPS. We can measure the output of good design. What's difficult is recognizing and measuring good designing. Because design is both a noun and a verb, and I would say the verb is where the value is in design. But do we really know where designing is? Is it in the Post-it note? Is it in the sketch? And do we do it alone, or do we do it together? Or do we do a little part alone and a little part together, right? Everywhere will be different, depending on where you work and what's valuable to them. But this is the point of design ops. Better design comes from better designing. So design ops is centered on the premise of making practices where better designing is happening. And we can measure designs, but we don't know how to measure designing. And then there's the space that we work in. I should have put a trigger on this one too, but like, there's a cube farm, right? And that has issues, right? It blocks communication, it isolates people, it makes it difficult to communicate, difficult to share ideas, and it's just depressing, to say the least. But then we could do, you know, a great design studio. Open floor plans, whiteboards everywhere, all of everyone's stuff is visible to everyone else, right? But people now have problems with open floor plans. It's not so simple because it doesn't allow for deep concentrated flow that our peers in engineering and other parts of the organization feel really strongly about. So it's not one or the other. It's a question that needs an answer, needs a design to answer. So how do we scale quality while making sure that we're moving along from our siloed world of design into becoming one of a partnership, so that we move from our waterfall, hey, we're over here in our nice little studio world, to, hey, we want you to be designing with us. We want you to be included in research. We want you to be a partner with us, right? One of my things that I've noticed is the question is, how do we do this without reducing the value that comes out of a designing practice? And so, yes, Agile is real. It is here to stay. Resistance is futile. Unfortunately, most Agile practices are not good Agile practices. Jared Spool often talks about Sturgeon's law. 90% of everything is bad, 10% is good. But there's good stuff in the Agile world. And just to talk about some of those things that we can take and use as bridge points between Agile and design, self-organizing is a really important concept in terms of the team that's going to build it needs to decide what the team makeup is, right? Respecting skills instead of respecting titles. So it's not about whose title is X, Y, or Z, right? Doesn't matter if someone's called a developer. It doesn't matter if someone's called a designer when they got hired. We have experiences that give us multiple skills through this process, and we should be able to use those in a respectful way. The next one is autonomy and accountability. And in having autonomy for your projects, it's your thing that you're building. You are given a goal to hit. That's the accountability part. If you hit that goal, great. How you hit that goal is up to the team responsible for hitting the goal, which requires empowerment, requires that you can make decisions, right? You need to make decisions that you know you can manage, and you need to be empowered to do those things. The next one is an approach of coaching, and Katya talked about coaching yesterday, but coaching is really important. It changes management style quite a bit. Management isn't telling somebody what to do. Management is helping them figure out what they need to do to reach the goals that you've mutually set together or mutually learned to understand together. The last two in bold are areas within the Agile world that I'm still struggling with, and I'm still trying to make those connections, and we'll talk a little bit more. But the one is managing and protecting flow. In English, we talk about flow as like focus, direct, heads down, working really hard, and it's really a big part of the development world. However, we're going to learn later that design practice excels in a different way. The iterative, constructive piece is that linear incrementalism that Agile and Lean are all about. You go and, you have the classic image of the skateboard and the kick scooter and the bicycle and so forth and so on till you get to a car. It's incremental. And the reality is life doesn't work that way, right? And design definitely doesn't work that way. Design would be like, hey, let's go out and study transportation needs so that we understand our user base that we want to tackle, or find a niche that didn't exist before. Oh, you know what? There's been this big boon of bike lanes throughout North America, for example. But not everyone is into bicycling for the exercise. But it's a great, important infrastructure. What can we do to help? Why don't we start designing electric bicycles? Oh, but wait, people, when they do their travel not for exercise, they need to have certain things. They need to have a place to be able to hold packages, maybe. They have children that they need to be able to put within the system, so forth and so on. And I can start from those insights and that knowledge base without having to even make a skateboard once, right? Running a bad experiment is still a useless experiment. It doesn't really teach you what you need, right? And so when I have that bicycle idea now and I have all of those insights, I can start crafting electric bicycles that are good for children in packages, and I can explore that space. I can make 50 designs really quick in a sketch and look at them and see what properties did my mind come up with. And then I can make connections between good and bad things and synthesize them together. I'll talk a little bit more about that. And that leads to the serendipity of design. So serendipity means happy accidents, and to me, it is the goal of studio culture. The goal of studio culture is the intentionality of serendipity. By creating environments where more accidents can happen, and the happy accidents can happen in a way where they can be used. So a little bit more about studio culture. There's idea that things need to be off the monitor, that you need to print things out, that you need to have a space where people can see the work in a passive, transparent way. And what I mean by passive is it shouldn't require an invitation or an alert or a notification for me to see it. I should just be able to go. And it should be something along the lines of looking over your shoulder, kind of equivalent to it. Externalizing your work, externalizing your thinking. If it's in your head, no one else can see it. If it's in your head, you can't connect it easily to the other things that are in your head. If you externalize your work, you can start creating those associations and connections. Studios empower interruption, not flow. Studios are about someone walking up to your desk, tapping you on the shoulder, and says, you know what? Your white space is off right there. If you just moved it over about 5 pixels, it would be great. And here's why, right? Interruption is about, hey, I see you're using Sketch, and I notice you don't have this plugin yet. Here's a new plugin that we've been using. I think you'd like it for what you're trying to work on. Interruption is asking for help. So it's not just people interrupting you. You also need to be able to, as the designer, to interrupt them, and they need to be open to that interruption too, right? So associative processing is like the connecting of things. So we talked a lot about that. But the other piece, which is sort of related to what Tom was talking about as his third point, is we need to have a vision of something, and then we can understand, A, where we're going, but we can also start taking things apart and creating smaller units in a very strategic way, right? And that leads to the last point where I can take that vision, I'm making it into a prototype of some kind, and then I deconstruct it into some useful pieces, and finally, I can reconstruct the pieces randomly again, right? In essence, for anyone who's seen the Lego movie, we're all master builders, right? We've taken all the Legos out there that are pre-made, and we take them apart, and we make something completely new out of it. And that's another major piece of design. So to kind of put them next to each other, Studio culture, deconstructive, meaning I have to make something to deconstruct. It's focused on problem understanding more than just problem solving. And it's about getting to the right design and finally imagining possible futures, as opposed to modern agile where it's constructive. It's about engineering solutions. It's about getting the design right. And unlike studio culture, it's more about risk management. So enough of that. Time to move on to operations. But before we can talk about design operations, we need to have just a little bit of conversation about what is operations, right? This is my layman's kind of definition. Probably will never see the light of Wikipedia ever. But everything necessary to support the activities necessary to produce value within a system, right? So there are activities that are value producing, and there are activities that are supportive of those activities, right? So, something important to realize is that the operations for one part of an ecosystem probably needs to be thought about and designed differently than the operations of another part of the system. So, if it's done correctly, right? So do we want to design the operations of baggage movement the same way that we design the operations of checking in, right? Do we want to treat human beings like baggage is really the question. And too often we are treated like baggage because of the value systems that are in place within many airlines. So I want to talk about date night ops. Do they have date night as a concept here in Brazil or Latin America? All right, let me explain a little bit then. So date night in the United States, at least, is because Americans have completely isolated themselves from their families, their extended families, for the most part. And so I can't go and say, hey, grandma, can you watch the kid? Or auntie, can you watch the kid? Or anything like that. I actually have to hire a babysitter just to go out and get dinner with my wife or go to a movie. So the operations of date night ops, has a linchpin of the babysitter. More important than what restaurant or movie you go to or whatever concert you go to, the babysitter is primary there. And you can see how I need the babysitter to be an activity or to be a resource that enables the value activity of going to the movie or eating dinner or spending time with my partner, so forth and so on. However, when it comes to operations, adding humans, actually when it comes to anything, adding humans to any system makes it infinitely more complex to do successfully, right? And the more humans you add to that system, the more you're scaling that problem out. So when we go back to that babysitter, we now have all of these questions, and I'm not going to read them all, but maybe they seem kind of familiar to you around vetting and hiring and training and, you know, what do they need to be successful? And the last one is all about culture fit, right? If the babysitter and the baby don't get along, then you're kind of not in a good place, right? So design ops, what is it, why is it? So we talked about better designs come from better designing, right? But another way to think about this is how do we amplify the value of design investment and hopefully, and thus, increase that investment further, right? If there's any design leader in the room who is like completely satisfied with how much their budget is, I want to meet you and find out how that is, right? You're Marvel. That's a different whole kind of unicorn kind of concept. We need a new word for that. But why design ops now? Like in the last 2 years, people like me and a bunch of others are like talking about design ops. And it wasn't really part of the vocabulary before. But something has been changing in the design community, and that is scale. We've just been scaling like we haven't before and at rapid paces, right? We have larger team sizes, which is great. People want more designers. For whatever good and bad reasons they want more designers, that's wonderful. But all more designers mean you also have more teams of designers, which is another kind of scaling problem. And then there's the number of systems that we need to connect together through the design, right? That's why we now have so many organizations creating design systems, for example, which then becomes another system that we need to scale, right? And then there's the number and type of integrations in all of these systems, APIs and other stuff, but it's also our integrations, right? Sketch goes into Zeppelin, or Zeppelin goes into Git, or Sketch goes directly into InVision, and Sketch also goes into Abstract, right? And whatever plugins you're integrating with, and then all of those things just have to go into Slack, right? You have to have a Slack bot for everything. So, design operations is the tooling, grease, rails that amplify the value of a design team. Tooling supports the crafts. Grease makes things smoother, reduces friction, right? And rails give us guidance, creates focus in what we need to do. So at the center of all of this is craft. We design. We have craft. There are many methods that we apply our crafts to, and those methods get used across different processes. And that little bullseye there is the center of designing, right? That's designing. Now, to support designing, we have these 4 areas: workflow, people, governance, tools, and infrastructure. We're going to dig into most of these. But even then, you have a layer underneath, which are elements of the culture that either impede or empower. You have values, you have principles, you have mission, you may have a vision, right? All of those things act in your culture. While I've been studying and talking about this and doing client work, what I've come to realize is that there are these 3 lenses that people bring with them. And you can think of lenses the sort of same way as, like, what kind of designer are you, right? If you came from advertising, you might have a different lens than someone who came from product, than someone who came from e-commerce, than someone who came from media, right? Those kinds of practices, while seemingly verticals, also have different lenses about what user experience design is, what is necessary to do user experience design, and so on. And so the 3 lenses in design ops are: workflow is the most popular, people comes next, and business is last. However, if someone comes in with a workflow perspective, like a program manager, right, which is one of the very early first titles that you'll hear for someone who's working in design ops, you slowly notice that for you to be successful as a program manager, you need to start inching up into the other lenses. So there's really no way to have a complete set of design operations without encompassing all of the pieces. So it's not like the center is the ideal design ops. It's just where the different views come together. And the goal here, again, is design success, team success, and increasing value, which should be the measure of success. However, the largest obstacle to design success is the misalignment of the value proposition that design provides an organization. This is to say that if you went into almost any organization and you ask someone, what is the value of design to your organization? A, it's very tough for people to answer. It's not something they've ever prepared or thought about. And B, if they were pushed, everyone in the organization would probably have a different answer, and they would have a different answer if you asked them like 2 weeks apart, right? And here's the gotcha. People who are designers in your design teams will have a different answer to what is the value of design. But what is value? What does that mean? It really simply, it answers, why should I bother coming to you, right? It's like a jobs to be done thing, if you will. And it justifies investment. Because if I need to come to you, I need to make sure you're there, so I need to invest in you, and I want to make sure that you do the best job. I want to make sure that you have the best outcomes because of those things. And the last part of it is value. What it is we define as that value suggests what should be measured to understand return on investment, right? Because return on investment isn't going to always be a dollar sign. There's going to be other things that you need to talk about. So I'm going to throw out there a proposed value of design. And I call it proposed because this is all very new. And I'd love for people to join in this conversation with me and the rest of the design ops community to help figure some of this stuff out. And the last thing is I'm incredibly open to the reality that one organization's value of design may be different than another organization's value of design. But for me, this is these 4 points. So it's about driving understanding and empathy. I need to understand and feel the needs, the motivations of the people who I am designing for. It's about creating clarity in behavioral fit. The systems need to be clear and understandable, findable, and they need to fit the cultural needs and the behavioral needs of the people by having the right behaviors in the products and systems that are being designed. Design is also about exploration. Like I was saying before about the bicycles, you can explore possibilities. Multiplicity of ideas getting connected together, right? And then finally, there's envisioning. I need to paint that picture of the possible better future for folks. How can I tell that story of what's happening, right? And you can see how some of these connect with the others, like they sort of build and reinforce each other. And they have a tool set. And these are just some of those tools. These are the ones that most directly relate to them. So storytelling and visual thinking, information presentation, facilitation of workshops, and then prototyping, simulations, stories, kind of stuff. And the skills, at least within software design, that go with these elements are research, facilitation, interaction design, information architecture, and visual design. And there could be others, right? And that's fine. Like if you have a physical device, you're going to need an industrial designer, right? If you have a space, you're going to need an architect. But these 5 things listed here don't necessarily have to be different people, right? Call them a UX designer, call them a product designer, and decide how the split is between the skills. And maybe one UX designer loves the top part of this, and the next UX designer that you hire is really good at the bottom part of this list. That's okay as long as you keep the skills balanced. So the pieces of design ops that are supporting designing are the same pieces that support everything else in your organization. But you need to be intentional about them in a design way. Human resources, community, communications, tools, infrastructure, workflow, and governance. So it's supporting the people in your organization, human resources. And it does it through recruitment and hiring, hopefully in the most humane, diverse, inclusive way possible. There's professional development, like y'all are here. There's career path and feedback protocols, hopefully, in your organization. How do you get recognized for successes? How are you rewarded for successes? Are they public? Are they private? Right? All of those issues get involved, and then org structure. And so diving into org structure a bit, as you scale over time, you need to have a plan for how you're going to scale, right? And scaling isn't just about adding. You're not just going to keep adding people and different titles and whatever. You're also transforming your team over that same period as the team grows. You're transforming generalists into specialists. You're transforming workflows to be more collaborative as you build more. You're changing the culture of your team. And that's where cultures and values come in. You need to make sure that your team has those cultures and values articulated, externalized, so that people can express them and understand them. And it's about advancing the practice or the practices that are in your team. How to make them better as you're scaling, right? Will this change in the organization actually lead to better outcomes from my designers and researchers? And one thing I've learned over time is that if you are not currently working to get your top design leader to be a peer with the equivalent engineering and product and marketing and so forth and so on, you're not just doing it wrong, you're just not going to be successful in the same way. That, just like we talked about lenses before, design, engineering, and product are 3 lenses too. And they overlay each other to create a wonderful view of what a product could be. But if one lens is thinner, or one lens is smaller, or one lens only works for another lens, then it's minimized. Its value is reduced in that way. The structure of design practice to create the most value, not based on who pays for it. It's about the value to be created. And when you do this work of designing your organization, you need to include everyone impacted by it. It needs to be a cross-functional exercise to be done. Based on value of design, having a roadmap towards a strategic vision. Am I dying? Okay. Not quite dead yet. And balancing skills. Speaking of balancing skills, the big debate, the ratios, How many designers to how many developers should you have? IBM is working towards 1 to 8. 1 designer per 8 developers. How many of you in the audience have somewhere 1 to 10 and less? Huh? Good number. Good number. Yeah, all right. You all can leave. You got it good. You can go now. No, just kidding. Because Gartner says you need to get it to 1 to 3. Right? That's kind of crazy. However, I've learned a different way of thinking about this, that it's actually not about the developers. It's actually about the product managers or product owners, whatever your organization calls it. And Karen Hansen had this wonderful presentation where she went over how she built the design organization all over again for a company called Intuit. We're mentioning Intuit a lot in this conference. And in her presentation, the ideal ratio isn't X designers to Y developers, but it is more than 1 designer per product manager owner. And you get to more than 1 as opposed to just 2, right? Because not everyone is dedicated to a single product manager. So you may have a dedicated lead designer, senior designer, and you may have a partial researcher, and you may have a partial visual designer, right? And they are more of like a service across maybe a product set and stuff. But I want to talk a little bit design leadership, because when you're organizing and building your team, you also need to think about not just the skills of the practice, but the skills of the leadership. And starting from the top is tradecraft. And tradecraft is leading the tangible crafting of experiences. Usually there's principals leading this, or a manager who is also what we call a player coach, right? The next one is stagecraft, which is the one that's most closely related to design ops, but anyone could do this. Any manager should be able to do some level of stagecraft, which is just making sure that the environment is made for success. Sometimes we call this air cover, it's like air cover plus a little bit of design ops, plus a little bit of project management all rolled into one. The next one is statecraft, and this is where diplomacy and vision come into play. Where are we heading? Why are we heading there? And I'm going to negotiate with everyone who may get in the way of our success of achieving that vision, right? How do I do that negotiation, that diplomacy, and creating relationships to make things better? When developing your team, you want to make sure team skills are balanced, that you can't just keep having generalists all the time. There need to also be specialists in your organization as you scale, right? It's not good to have a group of amoebas. You're going to need to have different skill sets that are more specialized as you grow. And you need to constantly invest in your people to develop them. And you need to bring outside resources to do that for the most part. So bringing outside resources could be as easy as saying, hey, go to a conference. Bringing outside resources could be, we want to host the next IXDA meeting in my town, right? And be the venue where that takes place so we make sure all of my team can experience it. It could be doing an offsite where you bring one really cool speaker to that offsite, right? So that it's pushing the team in a way. Come on. People need to know what good is. They need to know how to achieve what's next. They need to know what the job is and what is expected of them. And you need to have some kind of career ladder that helps them understand how to be good at what they're doing now, what they need to do to achieve what's next, right? The community of practice. So inside and outside your organization, you need to have that camaraderie. You need to have that sense of we are doing something together. And it's because you need to share and learn from each other, because things are scaling and coming too fast, right? It's not, you can't just rely on, reading blogs and reading books. You need to have that sharing going on both inside and outside. Your goal here is hopefully to increase total quality, but it's also about maintaining values and principles and mission, and create an environment that among that team drives engagement so that collaboration goes better. Trust is built. Communication, core method of transparency. And what's important here is that when we communicate, we're creating knowledge, and knowledge is power, as they say, but knowledge is also stability. When I know what's going on in my organization, whether it's my team level or the entire corporation, I feel better. My feet feel more grounded. And that allows me to be more engaged. So some of the things you're going to do is maintain history, change management, knowledge transfer. You want to make sure you have visibility into different parts of the organization. Meetings, gotta happen. Sorry to say. As much as like one prototype is equal to 1,000 meetings, you still need the 1,000 meetings. But there's different purposes for them, right? Chat, Slack, or whatever you use. Hopefully there's a wiki there, and then ticketing and tracking of some kind, task management, and then there's more. And then craft. Craft starts and ends tools. Tool selection. It'd be wonderful if everyone could just use their own tools and make their own decisions, but sometimes there's things that we need to do, right? Boring stuff like legal and security and performance. Then there's interoperability. If somebody's using one format of file output and someone else is using another format of file output, if one of those people disappears, the other person can't use what that person was using, right? And there's good and bad reasons for people disappearing. I'm a big fan of remote teams and remote collaboration. Kind of hard to get out of it these days. And then, does your company allow for cloud-based tools, SaaS or not the SaaS? And does your tool have a good workflow with other parts of the organization, right? But tools, in order to get them, usually require other people, especially procurement and IT, right? Procurement is like where you send it off to make the final PO or send the check or whatever. And IT is the people who need to vet it and set it up. Workflow, it's decision-making. It's not the decision-making, it's the flow that happens because of decisions. I often call workflow the team API, like the human API kind of process. It's about the connections that move and help you go, whatever go is. Hopefully you're contributing to both continuous delivery and continuous learning. And you're connecting tools to sort of make a postmodern factory, if you will, right? Some of the pieces when you're trying to understand your workflow, you have triggers, you have people, you have activities, you have tooling, you have channels of communication, you have governance, the rules, and then you have support, what is needed outside in order to be successful in that workflow. But workflow has different cadences depending on what activities you're doing. And from a design perspective, there are some activities, starting in the middle circle here, that are much more rapid cadence. You're doing production work. You're doing production issues. You're doing evaluative research. The next circle is you're working on things that are about understanding the direction and setting course, right? Some of that is research, some of that is design exploration. And the last one is trying to understand the environment that your users live in, whether your tools or products or services are being used or not. So outside the context of your tool, but all about the context of the people. And so you can understand them, so you can think better about them, understand the problems that they're facing more. I'm going to skip that. T's. Governance is the basis for decision making. It's the rules. So you got to make decisions. You got to know how. Are you consensus based? Is it your boss who makes all the decisions? Is it, everyone on the team has a veto? Don't know. Is your organization have a culture of autonomy and empowerment, like we spoke about before? You always have to understand risk when you make a decision. And with risk comes two things. Can I prevent it, but also can I recover from it? Is two ways of thinking about it. And then security and privacy and finally compliance are all matters that hit governance. Really quickly talking about research and research ops. Research is its own practice. Just like design is separate from engineering as a practice, right? Research is its own practice, and it has its own ops. This is some of the operational needs that your research team might have. And this is a big holy grail that people are trying to figure out, known as a research hub, where, hey, if I can put all of my data across all of my data sources into a single repository and connect all of those data across metadata in a semantic way, and then synthesize that data so I can then track where the insights came from, I would have nirvana, right? This is the win. Just a team model for research ops is you have a research leader that's supported by our research admin, and your product teams, your product designers, are also doing research. They're doing the first two circles, if you will, from the model before. And then culture. And this is my ideal culture, right? Take a culture of learning and infuse it with empathy, inclusion, and vision. And if you can create that culture, you'll be really successful. The parts that help you with that culture are values, mission, principles, and vision. And where is it found? It's found in the things that we're empowered to do. It's found in what we are kept from doing. It's how we make decisions. And it's in the rituals and how we recognize reward. And one way to understand your entire operations model is through the Design Ops Canvas. It has what do we do, who is it, how do we communicate, what constrains us, how are we structured, and are we structured with autonomy, or are there issues of common good and control? What's the management style? What management tools are made available? And then finally, miscellaneous. What else? Design ops is new. There's a lot to it. And in order to get this stuff started, you need to start small. So in the US, we talk about boiling oceans as like really big everything kind of thing. Well, take on a bay. Actually, if a bay is too big, take on a lagoon. If a lagoon is too big, take on a puddle, right? Be sure to make sure that you're including people, not just that are designers and non-designers, and you're collaborating with them so they feel a sense of ownership and understanding. Drill hard into adding value and aligning the value and meaning. Measure continuously, adjust accordingly, and imagine success. Work to make it happen. And that's it. pulsing at me. So I did take the full hour. I don't know. Are we going to do questions? Yes? Okay. There's a hand like waving back there. Well, there was one there too. Okay.
Hi.
Oh, wait. I have to get my fancy thing on here.
No, I'll ask in English.
Oh,
That's the
okay.
problem. Okay. So basically, your talk was about feasibility, viability, and desirability. My question is, what is the real contribution or great innovation that design ops has to offer beside design and basic design and management concepts? Because you've been through these basic concepts and it was quite superficial. So what's the innovation about design ops beside what we already know about UX and design thinking? Thank you.
Yeah, so design ops is about intentionality, about being purposeful in the decisions around all of this stuff. Most of my career, yes, we've had design operations happening, but it was all either decisions made by non-designers or it was not intentionally thought about. And so what's been growing is that organizations are basically service designing their design practice is what is happening. So that's my answer, basically, really simply. And yeah, it could be your version of design management. My understanding is that as we scale teams, the design manager is getting like completely overused, and that they're not able to do the things that managers are supposed to do in terms of managing the team and managing the work, and because they're taking on operational things like buying a license and stuff like that, that they shouldn't be doing.
Dave, back here.
Okay.
My question here.
Where am I?
Here, yeah. Can you see me?
No.
To
Are you
your
standing?
right a bit. Yeah.
Oh,
here.
flashlight. I like the flashlight.
My question is, I work at a company and we are almost reaching the one-to-one product person to designer. But the main question is, how do we balance the skill set? So if I have a person that's very good at interaction, but not so good at visuals, that part of the product will not have good visuals, and the other way around. How do you balance that skill set when you are almost reaching one-to-one for product to designer?
Yeah, so I think how companies have been scaling that issue is just through design systems or style guides, so that you as an interaction designer or an information architect or whatever you call yourself are able to implement existing patterns in your designs as opposed to invent things, right? And really focus the visual designer on maintaining that visual integrity, as well as being like a resource for escalations that happen along the way, meaning some kind of new visual requirement that the existing system didn't accommodate previously. So I would say that, like I was saying before, that one designer, or it's more than one designer per product manager, because other people like research and visual designers and so forth are going to need to sometimes be brought in at a quarter time or less. Depends.
Hello, my name is Wonderson Jackson.
No, this was next. He raised his hand like ages ago.
Well, as I was saying, my name is Wonderson Jackson. I actually coordinate a design team, and my question is, how can we scale how we could actually implement systematically the design ops and in order to scale our design team, and because we are reaching to a moment that our design system is growing. Team, we gotta hire more people. How we can make this more effective?
Yeah. It always depends on your organization. So sort of underlying kind of thing. What I can tell you is how I've done it in the past in the organizations that I've worked for. So I was a manager of design, right? And I started being stretched because I was taking on too many operational things, and I needed to not do those things because I was losing attention on the other stuff. And so one of my designers on their own was like really interested in research operations. And so she just took it on. And I was like, oh my God, thank you for taking it on, right? And she just did that. And then I was like, poof, hey, does somebody else want to do something? And the operations kind of got split up between the team. And because of that, I was able to create a protocol saying 20% of your time will go to some operational project that you're working on. And it kind of started from there until that started to stretch, because 20% wasn't enough anymore. And that's where, for example, hiring the research designer, the research ops people came in for that practice. But it also meant hiring specific people for the design system and growing that. So we had a team of 3, just 100% on the design system, reporting into me, but hopefully eventually reporting into a design system coordinator and having much of the horizontal stuff, not product-specific stuff, under that person. Sure.
Dave, I try to speak in English.
You don't have to. I have this handy-dandy thing, so.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
Can be in English. About the studio culture, how can we? There always the person who says, "Oh, we don't need to put on the wall. I need some digital stuff so I can look when I'm in meetings or home office or something like that." How can we do this? How can we bring the wall, the studio culture to digital, or how can we convince the person that is always best to put on the wall, to visualize in the way that everyone can co-create?
Yeah, so I would say it's a question of show, not tell.
Sure.
So like, you want to do it, right? And do it in a way where you include everyone in it, explain what you're doing when questions arise, but just do it and make it so, basically. But I think there's always going to be resistance because some people protect their process better and others are just like, I have a deliverable, I have to hit my deliverable time. So back and forth, right? Yep. We've got 1 minute and 42 seconds. Oh, question.
Hey.
Found you.
Olá, vou perguntar em português.
Okay, hold on.
Como que a gente pode aplicar o Design Ops, ou se existem boas práticas para pessoas que trabalham em consultorias e a realidade que a gente tem em diferentes projetos, normalmente, sei lá, 1, 2 designers trabalhando em diferentes projetos, né, 1 ou 2 por cada projeto. E como é que a gente aplica o Design Ops no mundo da consultoria, onde os projetos são completamente diferentes, os usuários completamente diferentes também? Como é que a gente unifica esse processo?
Yeah, so how can we unify the process if we're in an agency client services setting? And it's operational model doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it the same way in every organization. Your problem is different, right? So you need to just do the work of understanding where you are, what value you're creating where you are, and how to do better, right? So maybe design ops is not about community quality, but maybe it's more about hiring practices, right? And it's more about tool set alignment, communication platforms, things like that. Aplauso. Says
Obrigada.
aplausos. Aplausos. So we're done. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.